Good morning and welcome to today's webinar, Navigating Climate Change, Impacts and Adaptation for Tourism Operators. I'm Juanita Ford, COO of Hospitality Newfoundland and Labrador, and we're excited to kick off this important series in partnership with Climate Atlantic. As you all know, climate change is an urgent and growing issue that is already beginning to affect tourism operators in Newfoundland and Labrador, and we need to be prepared for what is to come. These webinars aim to raise awareness and provide practical guidance to help businesses like yours adapt to these changes while identifying new opportunities that might arise. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that the land in which we gather virtually today is the ancestral lands of the Beothuk, Inuit, Innu, and Mi'kmaq peoples. Hospitality Newfoundland and Labrador recognizes diverse histories and cultures of these Indigenous groups, and we strive to work towards truth, reconciliation, and respectful relationships. Today, we're thrilled to have our colleague, Seper, with us from Climate Atlantic. Seper is a climate services specialist, and he'll be walking us through the current and projected impacts of climate change in the tourism industry, as well as some practical strategies for adapting these shifts. After the presentation, we'll open the floor to our questions, so please feel free to type those in the Q&A box as we go. Your input today will help us share future sessions, inputting potential in-person workshops targeting different tourism sectors like marine, winter, and outfitting tourism. With that, I'll turn it over to Sefer to get us started.
Thank you so much, Juanita. Hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Seper. It's a little exotic name, I know, but that's okay. As long as I know that you're calling me, that's totally fine. So today, I'm really happy that I'm going to talk about climate change adaptation in Newfoundland and Labrador, and actually how and what it means for our sector, tourism sector, and how we can actually adapt our sector to this changing climate. So this is the first webinar, and we are going to have multiple webinars, hopefully in future, and we're going to provide more context for you. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. So this is just a quick snapshot of what today is about. First of all, I'm going to give you a quick context of our organization that I work for, Climate Atlantic, and what we do, what are our services, and where we are. And next, I'm going to talk about the relationship between Climate Atlantic and Hospitality of Newfoundland and Labrador, and then quickly I'll be talking about a brief overview of climate change and climate change impacts for tourism sectors, specifically the sub-sectors, including winter, marine, and outfitters. And next step's gonna be that how we can support Hospitality Newfoundland, Labrador members, and how we can actually manage climate related risks and take benefit of potential new opportunities in future. And some tangible next steps going to be presented for next future webinars and next in-person activities. And we're going to have a quick Q&A session. So hopefully it's going to be a very valuable experience and enjoyable experience for you, because it needs to be fun while it is serious, while we are talking about climate change impacts, and it needs to be informative for sure. So let's get on our organization. So this is the organizational chart. It's not a chart. This is just kind of an image that illustrates where we are right now. Climate Atlantic is a regional climate services hub across Atlantic Canada. We are all in the 4 Atlantic provinces. I am the climate services specialist of Newfoundland, and I'm actually very pleased to let you know that my Labrador colleague, Willa Nielsen, is on this call today. And so you're all covered all around the province. So as you can see, we belong to a very great network of knowledgeable people all across Atlantic Canada. We are constantly, sorry about that, my voice is not helping me today. So we are connected to individuals and networks that constantly provides support and information for us to help stakeholders and service users manage their climate risks and climate impacts. We are federally and provincially, I mean all four provinces, Atlantic Canada, funded to help people who are dealing with climate change impacts. We provide information, climate data, tools, resources to any end users, including any stakeholder, including municipalities, provincial governments, sector representative, and individuals to deal with their climate change impacts. So why I'm here today, why we're giving this webinar, is because on 18th of April 2024, Climate Atlantic and Hospitality of Newfoundland and Labrador signed a memorandum of understanding. Both of our CEO and Executive Director, Craig Foley from Hospitality of Newfoundland and Labrador, and Sabina Dietz, our Executive Director, actually signed this MOU to provide tailored services, which are free of charge. I need to say that for Hospitality of Newfoundland and Labrador members. And so climate change, our tourist members are facing with climate change impacts in their day-to-day operation and business. And we need resources, we need expertise, we need data, information, and tools and conversations around that to help them minimize the impacts, minimize the adverse impacts, and take benefit of future potential opportunities in our sector. And as you know, tourism is a vital piece of this, a vital economic contribution piece for all of the Atlantic provinces, including Newfoundland and Labrador. So it's very important to take climate change into account and for our planning and for our future investment. So as I said, I'm going to provide a quick overview of climate change and its impact on our subsectors. Today, we're going to talk about marine and winter and outfitters. But quickly, I'm going to talk about what's going to happen in terms of climate change in Newfoundland and Labrador. I provided a very important climate variables for this presentation, including temperature, precipitation, and the other actually occurrences, just like relative sea level rise, extreme events, and other impacts. So as you can see, I provide some localized climate change projections for comparing three different timelines. Our baseline starts from 1970 to 2000, and midterm is by the mid-century, and we have other projection by the end of the centuries. All these climate models are under the high emission scenario or business as usual, which is the same. It's the current emission rate that we are living right now. And in this slide, you can see the average seasonal temperature and gives you good understanding. You can actually compare apple to apple or orange to orange. So climate change will bring milder temperatures with the most significant increases seen during winter in Labrador. As you can see right now, let me give you a quick example. For example, in Nain, summer in Nain, used in our baseline period, the average summer temperature was around 8.9 degrees or almost 9 degrees, let's say 9 degrees. This figure is projected to be 11 degrees in summer between 2020 to 2050, so mid-century. And again, summer by the end of the century in Nain will be about 15.6 degrees or 15.5 degrees. So you can see the change of our summer temperature. But the most important part maybe is the winter temperature in Labrador. As you can see, the average winter temperature, for example, in Nain again, in our baseline period was about minus 16 degrees. And if you compare that to winter temperature in mid-century, it's going to be minus 12 degrees. And it's going to be a lot warmer by the end of the century, which is around -5 degrees. So comparing -16 to -5 somehow is a drastic change. And for example, let's come to Newfoundland. For example, Corner Brook, the summer temperature was around 15 degrees. Now, the summer temperature in mid-century for Corner Brook is going to be about 17 degrees, and it's going to be 21 degrees in summer by the end of the century. So you can see and you can understand what it means in terms of seasonal temperature and what we can actually expect from that. So the next slide, I'm going to talk about precipitation. This is the annual average total precipitation. It means rain and snow combined together. So province-wide, we are going to have almost on average 18 degrees by the end of the century, 18% by the end of the century, an increase in total precipitation. But that's not all of the story. The story is that we're going to have more rainy days and less snowy days. For example, let's look at St. John's, which is the city that I'm based in. The baseline period for St. John's, the total average precipitation is around 1,390, let's say 114 millimeters. That figure going to have an increase by 5% by mid-century and by 9% by the end of the century. So you can see every locations from St. John's to Lanzo Loop, they're going to have increase in total precipitation. But as I said, that's not the whole story. This is, we are going to have more rainy days and less snowy days. Below you can see, for example, St. John's, in the baseline period, we used to have 121 days on average for rainy days and 48 days snowy days on average. For the baseline, that was for baseline. For the mid-century, the number of rain is going to be 135 days. So you can see the change. You can see the increase in number of rainy days, and you can see the reduction of snowy days by mid-century, which is only 33 days. And by the end of century, we're going to have only 16 days on average, the number of snowy days. So more rain, less snow. And again, that's not the whole thing. We are going to have more intense precipitation and more frequent precipitation. And one more thing that mostly Newfoundland Labradors are quite familiar with, that is freezing rain, which is projected to increase province-wide. And so, yeah, temperature is increasing. We are going to have more precipitation. And one more thing is that we're going to have more extreme weather events. So Newfoundland Labrador might be the most impacted Atlantic Canadian province by both tropical and extratropical storms. Storms will be a strength because warmer air can hold more moisture, and moisture is the fuel of hurricanes and storms. So storms are going to be more frequent and going to be more powerful. It can cause more rare and intense rainfall events all across the province. And something that is actually changing these patterns and dynamic of a storm is that since they're going to be more powerful, they might have this ability to travel more inland. So not just our coastal communities will be impacted by storms, maybe even more inland communities might be impacted or might experience storms or more intense storms in future. And the next one is relative sea level change, which is, again, we have very localized projections for that by the end of the century. Relative sea level change is a very context-based parameter. So it depends where you are. It has other factors and dynamics involved. But by the end of the century, you can see different locations, what they are seeing and how they can actually experience sea level change. For example, Port aux Basques, by the end of the century, is projected to see 85 centimeter increase in relative sea level change. And different locations might experience different figures of relative sea level change, but the implications might be different. So that needs to be very, very context-based interpretation. So all these things, I know that our oceans, our water is the most important, one of the most important ecosystem that we rely on, and we need to talk about sea surface temperature. So we divided the average sea surface temperature for Newfoundland and the average sea surface temperature for Labrador by mid-century and by the end of the century. As you can see, by mid-century, the average water temperature for the waters that are all across the island in Newfoundland, we're going to have an increase of almost 2 degrees, almost 2 degrees of increase in water temperature, sea surface temperature. And by the end of the century, it's going to be around 5 degrees, 4.7 degrees to be exact. And again, all of these projections are under high emission scenario. And this is the scenario which is called business as usual. It's this type of the emission scenario that we are right now living in. For Labrador, we are going to have increase a little bit slighter. For example, by mid-century, Labrador will increase 1.3 degrees of increase in sea surface temperature, and it's going to be around 4 degrees by the end of the century. So all of these changes, as I talk, they might have different impacts for different people, for different community, and for different subsectors. We need to translate this information and make it, as tangible as possible, and how actually we can actually address these impacts. So, as I said, we are going to talk about marine, winter, and outfitter subsectors. So just briefly talk about these impacts. There are not these impacts that are listed here are not limited to these ones, but I mean, definitely the list can be more than that, but I just picked the most important ones that tourist operators have seen so far. So, for example, I talked about sea level rise and more storms. What it means? It means that we are going to have more coastal erosion and we're going to have more coastal flooding, and that leads to some infrastructure damages for our marine operators. And again, that can reduce the long-term suitability of operating locations for these operators. So as I talked about, we're going to have more oceanographic and terrestrial environment changes, which can shift the abundance of some species. We might have less, we might see differences, for example, in whale watching. We might some differences in the distributions of, for example, icebergs or bird migration patterns. So these are all the changes that some of the people, when I talk about, they have actually experienced it so far, and we might see it more, amplified in future. Our winter tourism. So I think I briefly talked about the temperature. Temperature plays a very important role for winter tourism. We talked about that location-based, what's going to be our temperature like by the mid-century and by the end of the century. And they're going to have less snowy days and more rainy days, which means we are going to have lower amount of snow. So snow accumulations will be lowered. So that means our winter season tourism length is going to be shorter, and we're going to see more winter melting events that can have more implications. And winter precipitation, as I talked, freezing rain is projected to increase, which can cause infrastructure damage for our trails. That can cause again infrastructure and infrastructure damage and health and safety damage or hazard for our tourist operators. And wind of the storms, we are going to have more extreme events, and that can impact our operation and travel. So we are going to have more whiteout situations, which can cause unsafe trail conditions for operators and tourists, and that can actually cause ski slopes be closed for some time. So that's going to be a quick picture of what's our winter tourism and winter like in future. And basically, climate change can impact this business for sure. Outfitting subsectors, as I talked, temperature again plays a very important role in this subsector. Species abundance will be altered, and health and safety will be an issue. For example, we might be exposed to ticks and Lyme in future, and that can increase some health and safety concerns for tourists and workers in the field. Changing river system is another thing, as we have different temperatures, different types of precipitations. They're all interconnected together, and they can change the river system and the ecosystem in that river. That can sometimes affect operations. We might have some river closures, and that might actually happen more often. Again, wind and storm is almost everywhere because it impacts our operation. It is very important for our health and safety and for supply chain. So if you have more extreme weather events, it means that more operations going to be disrupted due to that fact. And health and safety again is another topic of interest for operators that they need to take that into account. So maybe you might ask me that, so we might already know these impacts, what is your solution? What is your approach? And how it can actually help us? Just to let you know that just right after pandemic, government of Newfoundland and Labrador produces very good tools and resources to help tourist operators. Here, we are going to provide tools and resources, but we are going to interpret it very difficult climate data and make it as tangible as possible for your operation, for your day-to-day life. So we provide resources, we provide data, and we facilitate these conversations around climate change impacts and tourism sector to make it more tangible for you. And fostering this kind of a future forward looking, future forward thinking is something that we want to would be the ideal end goal of this partnership. Because when you want to invest in a kind of a business, you have a kind of a midterm or long-term planning and view. So every businesses, every sectors these days need to take climate change into account if they want to have a sustainable and long-term business. So climate change is right now these days an inseparable component of every businesses. But we need resources. We need help to make them understandable, and how we can actually help our operators to make informed decisions. Basically, we are going to have, this is just the beginning of this series. We're going to have multiple webinars, as you can see here. We are going to have, in future, we're going to have multiple webinars for subsectors on relevant topics. So this is very important that we build relationship together. And I can hear from you, or Hospitality Newfoundland Labrador can hear from you, hear what your concerns are, what your needs are, and we can plan and deliver webinars and in-person workshops about these types of topics. So hopefully in future we are going to have webinars around subsectors, including marine and winter tourism and outfitters. And potentially, depending on your interest, we can be in your community or close to your community to connect with you and to develop more and deeper engagement. We can identify your vulnerabilities, where your vulnerabilities are, and where your vulnerabilities will be in future, minimize those by the adaptation strategies that we can co-develop together, and understand what the risks are and where going to be the potential future opportunities. Because by these changes, as I talked about, for example, the temperature change, the precipitation change, our landscape and our environment will be changed as well. So maybe there are some opportunities in tourism sector that tourist operators can be, be benefited from, but they need to know in advance that what's going to be the change like in future and how they can actually plan ahead. And including speaking about risk, we can actually minimize those risks by taking climate change strategies into account. So this is the most important part. Relationship is the most important part. And I hope that I can hear from you. This is just a very friendly engagement to understand what are your needs right now and how we can help you for the next steps. And here is my email address, and here's the website of climateatlantic.ca. Feel free to email me and talk about your concerns, talk about your climate risk that you're dealing with or you're experiencing, and what changes you see in your community, and how we can actually, what your needs are, how we can actually help you. Feel free to email Hospitality of Newfoundland Labrador and share your needs with them, and let them know that what you need from us. So as I said, this is just the beginning of this partnership between Climate Atlantic and Hospitality of Newfoundland Labrador. And in future, we're going to provide more tailored services for your needs and for your community and for your subsector. Yeah, here it is. This is the end of my presentation. We are going to have, I think, a quick Q&A session. And hopefully you find it useful for your sector and for your business.
Great. Thank you so much for your insight and timely presentation. It's clear that climate change is not an environmental issue, but a business one too. And being proactive is essential to safeguarding our industry. So now we're opening up the floor for some Q&A. Please type your question in the Q&A box and we'll get to them. Okay, we can all just jump right in. Thanks again for your presentation. And as I said, we have been working on this climate change and bringing resources. After the webinar, I'll actually share a link to the resources that we currently have for climate change that we've provided for industry. We have a lot of stuff that talks about snow levels in each region of the province. We have information that's done on regards to the impacts in those areas. We have specific tools for each of those sectors that you talked about, plus our overall research and our risk management tool. So, can you give me an idea of kind of what you have been hearing from around the province? I know you've traveled and presented as well. Is there anything that jumps out at you the most at some of those areas?
That's an interesting question, Juanita. Yes, I have traveled all across Newfoundland and Labrador. I have been to every single community, and I talked to different people from different sectors. As I said, I deal with different sectors: municipalities, tourism, constructions, forestries, and academia, folks at the governments. And when you talk to people, they all acknowledge climate change impacts in their region. They can see, okay, back in time when I was a kid, we have that amount of the snow, but these days it's not even comparable. So people have experienced the changes, and they need resources. They need, more than anyone, they know climate change. Newfoundland or Labradorians, they understand climate change better than everyone else. That's what I can actually guarantee. But here right now, we need to have conversations around climate change in a very strategic view. So this is the problem. This is the question: how we can solve it, how we can actually have some approaches to minimize the impacts. That's the question. With the changing climate, we're going to have differences in our operations, in our lifestyles, in our day-to-day life. But how we can, this is the most important part, how we can reduce the adverse impacts and can take benefit of potential future opportunities. This is different from sector to sector. For example, from constructions, from forestry, from agriculture, or from municipalities is complete. They're all completely different. So we need to have conversations. We need to have service. We need to have data, climate change information data, which is the most important part because we need to know what's going to be future like. If you don't know what's going to be future like, so we cannot plan ahead. And for example, for marine might be different from outfitters in terms of climate change adaptation strategies. So these kind of conversations are essential. These kind of relationship are essentials. And whenever I talk to people, they are very eager in fostering these conversations. We need to be a little more, I would say, vocal, and I'm pretty sure that people will reach out to us and talk about their needs and their concerns. And these kind of conversation can be definitely very, very, very useful for everybody, for sure.
Great. If you had, what is your, maybe from your experience, the top five things, or if there's top five, that people could start to do now to adapt their businesses to climate change?
Well, I can maybe I can talk about that. Adaptation is a process. It's an ongoing process and need to be updated. And it needs to be looked at in a strategic view because when we're talking about adaptation, climate is always changing. Okay, climate is always changing. This climate change is anthropogenic change, is the change that human is actually causing that. So, but it's a process that's always happening, and that actually means that adaptation should be an ongoing process. The first thing is that where we are right now and what are our vulnerabilities in terms of, for example, tourism. Where are the most important things that you think might be important for you in your operation, in your business? And when you figure out where your vulnerabilities are, we can then understand what climate hazards actually influence that vulnerabilities. What are the climate hazards? What are the weight of each climate hazards? So this needs a kind of protocol, a kind of framework to understand where the vulnerabilities are, what are the climate hazards are actually influencing their vulnerabilities, and then they can figure out what resources they have. So these are 1 to 5 strategies that you can actually follow up and we can walk through together. It's not something that's okay, I can give you this, for example, resource and leave you there. No, we walk through together to understand those strategies and to implement those strategies. After implementation, you need to review all this process together and evaluate which component works better, which component didn't work well, so we can actually reform this process again. This is the foundation or the beginning of adaptation process. It's an ongoing process. It needs relationship building, as I said. It needs lots of conversation around that. And the first thing is to understand where we are and where are our vulnerabilities.
Great. I'm not seeing anybody jump through the Q&A box, but please do. I'll just ask one final question, and if we don't see any, then we'll probably clue up this morning. But I know we talked a little bit about, I guess, the sectors of our industry that are reliant on the outside environment, the waters and snow, the flora and fauna and every other thing that we might depend on. But we have some operators on the line and who are probably have more infrastructure like hoteliers or cabin operators or tour bus companies. And they're looking at ways, I guess, to adapt their own, those types of businesses, plus also maybe reduce emissions. Any advice for those?
Well, as I said, the first thing is that we need to have conversations. I know that people have different types of assets and different types of investments in their businesses, and they might face different impacts depending on their operation and businesses. So that's what I said. We can provide tailored services for every specific individual or any specific subsectors or sector of businesses. So this is very important that I understand, I listen to their conversations, what experiences they're facing, and we can provide these kind of thoughts and suggestions for them. Definitely, there are organizations that provide mitigation services, how they can actually reduce their greenhouse gases. At Climate Atlantic, we focus strictly on climate change adaptation, but there are organizations in province like Econext, which I have a shared role between Econext and Climate Atlantic, I should say, that provide services that or resources that they can actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions and be more sustainable. But climate change adaptation and climate change mitigation are both of them, they can walk hand in hand, and both of them are important piece of sustainability and economic prosperity. But something that I need to again maybe emphasize a little more on that, if you want to have a more sustainable and prosperous business in future, you need to take climate risk into account. Back in time, we had some financial risk only, we had some insurance risk only. But in today's business, if a sustainable business, long-term business needs to have climate risk managed. And that's why we are here to provide that kind of strategy, that kind of thinking to manage climate risk and potentially to take benefit of future opportunities. Because, as I said, temperature is going to increase. We might have some other activities available here in Newfoundland or in Labrador that might not be even possible, for example, 20 years ago, or the length of those activities was very short. But this is the opportunity that's coming to Newfoundland, and we take benefit of that while we are managing our risks.
Great. I do have some comment here from one of our attendees. In 2023 was the worst year ever in the past 38 that we had less snow. We had no snowmobiling to my lodge after March 16th. It was a dead business. In the summer here now, the kids are always swam from Wales, not anymore. We have too many sharks in the water. Oh no. I live in the northeast side and operate from the town of Mainbrook. I see very clearly the problem for my company as it continues again this year. The summer we see the change that it brings that don't much benefit from big game animals, and we're able to feed better, and their environment is less hard on their survival. So we got good points and bad points, I think, there from Barb's comments on the change in her area.
As I said, exactly. This is totally in line with my conversation with people. Newfoundlanders and Labradorians understand climate change better than everyone else. That's I can guarantee. They have seen and they have experienced and they have witnessed changes during their lifetime. Elsewhere, you need to talk about, you have to spend a lot of time talking about climate change. But here, our people are very knowledgeable. Their lived experience actually indicate that they are very well educated about climate change and their impacts. So that makes our change a little bit easier. So while we know, and we talked about the snow, we talked about sharks. This is actually right now in the research papers, they are indicating that we are seeing sharks in our waters. This is fact. So we need to take benefit of this changes, and we need to manage this risk. That's all I want to actually help do with our operators. This is the important piece, and conversations around these topics can be very beneficial for everybody in this space. Not only tourism, but sectors are connected to each other. When you are increasing the resilience of one sector, eventually it cascades to other sectors as well. So it eventually can make one whole community more resilient and stronger against changes.
Great. Thanks. I don't see anybody else posting anything, but feel free to send along any questions you might have directly to our guest today. And I guess I'll clue it up for today, unless you have any final comments you want to share.
The final comment is that please email me or Hospitality of Newfoundland Labrador. Just let them know or let me know what are your needs and what you want, and share your ideas with us and your thoughts with us. And let's build up some relationships, and we can work together. It takes a village, and by working together, by being together, we are going to be more resilient and stronger, for sure.
Great. It's one last comment here. one of our attendees posted. We rely on snowmobiles for our winter season as well. 2023 was one of the worst seasons to date. So
Yep, yep, totally. As
seeing
I
that
said,
there, yes, for sure.
Newfoundlanders Labradorians understand climate change better than anyone else. You can see from the from the comments. I can't see that because I have shared my screen, but I was expecting these kind of comments because they understand climate change better than anyone else.
Great. All right, thank you again for joining us all today. We hope this webinar has provided you with valuable insights on how climate change might affect your business and some steps that you can do to adapt. We'll be sending out a follow-up email with some takeaways and additional resources, so be sure to keep an eye on your inbox. If you have any questions, please feel reach out to any of us. Thanks again for your participation. We look forward to seeing you at our next event. Stay safe and keep working together to adapt and thrive in this climate change. Thank you.
Thank you.